Truly is a blessing to be in the house of the Lord. Um, Missed y'all last week meeting. Hits different when you miss on a Sunday, um, but I was thinking because I went somewhere and it kind of like just hit me. It was a place I've never been to. It's a part of Clinton, Maryland. I had to go play somewhere, and I realized like the app that I normally use on my phone almost every single day is either Maps or Google Maps. Like those are the apps that are like on standby, the ones that I just need. See, if y'all don't know, I come from a time where we actually needed actual maps. And if you were cool, you went to a place, it's a website, I don't even know if it still exists, MapQuest. See, I got some old grandfathers here with me too. I'm that old, where you needed MapQuest. And if you were to go somewhere that you've never been, somebody had to print those directions. Who got the MapQuest? It's just somebody just rolled it up and you just see, turn here, turn there. If you had to see, the thing is that during at least my time, you needed a little bit of money to have something called a GPS. And you were blown if somebody broke into your car to steal your GPS. Because it didn't come with the car. You had to mount it, and you wanted to look cool. Just it's right there. It's mounted, and talk to you. What is it? Garmin? Yeah, Garmin. Oh, my gosh. See, y'all don't even know, because you could just pull it up, MapQuest, Siri, take me here, and just, But that was the time that I went. If you didn't have MapQuest, you didn't know where to go. But even with MapQuest, sometimes you would just get lost. I don't know how. Even with those directions, there's nobody telling you to turn here. And so you just missed your turn. I remember a time I was asked, and this all hit me because I was asked to play somewhere, but I was asked to play at this retreat I've never been to. This was years ago, and it was in Lynchburg, Virginia. It's about 4 hours away from here. And a couple of musicians were like, all right, we're going to go, and it's going to take us 4 hours, right? And we decided to go late Thursday night because we had to get there by Thursday night. We got lost. We knew we were somewhere in Lynchburg, but like late at night at a place called Lynchburg, everybody just looks a little bit, with some melanin on them. Just to say, I didn't know. I'm like, bro, Lynchburg? You know why they call it Lynch? We didn't know anything. We were just afraid, but we were lost. And it seems like every other turn that we would make us lose ourselves more. And what became a 4-hour trip now became a 6-hour trip. You start to lose hope. It's late at night. Streets are dark. I mean, you're going to be afraid to ask for directions, it's Lynchburg. And this is that. The area that's in, it's like in mountain area, so there was like no signal. And again, this is like Sprint, Nextel, Time. See, oh my gosh, I'm so old. But we didn't have Edge or 4G or 5G. It was service, You just had service or you didn't have service. I had a half a bar, and that's what it was. And all of us didn't have somebody to call because we had no signal. But luckily, in the moment that like all hope was lost and we were just going to just park and wait till daylight to just make it, we get a call. And that person meets us up, knew exactly where we were. They were at the location. And we were able to follow them back to the location. Come to find out, we had passed the entrance like a good 20 times. But those that have gone to this Lynchburg retreat may know it's kind of like that turn. If you missed it, you missed it. Like there's no light, there's nothing there. You just missed it. I'm letting you know, when you're lost, you don't know where you're going. You don't know what direction. You lose all hope. You're confused. You're bitter. You're tired. Again, 4 hours, now 6. But when you get to your destination, it's like a relief. Man, I made it. Even now, with the GPS or the maps, you finally got there. I made it. Like, it's a relief. And I'll say, that was one of the best retreats that I've been a part of, that first one. I remember because it was like, wow, being lost for 6 hours made it all worth it. Today we begin a series in the book of Ruth where we will begin a story of someone that's actually feeling lost, hopeless, and bitter on the journey that she is on, but also on how our faithful God moves people and pieces together for a much greater redemption story in the destination of God's grace. Today we will be reading the first chapter of Ruth, but before getting into our main text, we need to know a little bit about this particular book and how we will be approaching this series. Just know, many associate this book only for women. Only for women. I don't know why. They approach it with some eisegesis. They read you into the text like, girl, you better get your Boaz. And I'm just like, that's not what it's about. Women's conference, get you a Boaz. It's not even that. So we will not read ourselves into the text like we are Ruth, but we will exegete or draw out what God is saying through his word. The first thing we need to know is we don't know the particular author of the book of Ruth. Although some attribute it to the prophet Samuel, it's actually been written between 1250 BC and 1050 BC. Which is before Samuel's time. The book is meant to be a segue between the time of the judges and the time of the monarchs or the kings. Hence why the placement of the book, if you notice, the book is between Judges and 1 Samuel. It's literally right in between there. This book is actually written in a narrative type of story. It's a blend of history mixed with some drama and a theological agenda. So yes, this book is rich in theology. And what it's doing is highlighting the attributes of God's faithfulness. Second, and she said amen, I like that. Second, a way to be able to get a hold on this narrative story is to actually see this like a movie or a Broadway performance or a play. As there's 4 acts in this story, and each act has particular scenes which help give a different angle of God's redemptive story. God here is presenting this to us, and especially even in this first act or in this first chapter, what you will see is this theme and this word of return. It's used a lot just in this first chapter, and it's meant to set the setting or the mood to turn back to God as God is redeeming his people. The third thing we need to know is although the book is named after Ruth, what you will come to find out fairly quickly, it's not much said about Ruth. Ruth actually says quite a little in this book. If you really look at it, she doesn't even seem like she's the main character of the story. The book can even be called the Book of Boaz, because he played a bigger role in this story, if you really think about it. But in actuality, this book can actually be called the Book of Naomi. We will learn more about Naomi than Ruth. Because the thing is that the story of Naomi is about Ruth. This story is going to highlight who Naomi is and who God brought to her life. And lastly, when you first start reading the book of Ruth, you wouldn't realize for what reason this book even made it into the Bible at first. You're like, why is this book in the first place? Like, what's the point of this story? And not to give you a little plot twist or a spoiler of the end, but at the end of Act 4, we'll be presented with a baby that's been born. And from that lineage of that baby, we come to have our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So this book is not about Ruth, go get your Boaz. This story is about how God is faithful in the midst of times where you think you can never get to your destination. So first, let's look at the first act in the story. We're reading Ruth, chapter 1, verse 1 through 22. And this is the word of the Lord. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited the people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go return, each of you, to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with me, with the dead, and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? So turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, and Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts from me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the 2 of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred up because of them. And the woman said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. The first act can be divided actually in 3 scenes. The first scene we will be addressing is leaving for tragedy, which is found in verses 1 through 5. But if you notice in verse 1, you'll be able to get the sense of the mood the narrator is presenting in this scene, and also gives us a time frame on where they are at. Just look at that first part of verse 1. It says, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land." If you were to just glance over in your Bibles, just take a look at the last verse of the book of Judges, you see how the people were acting during this time. You can see the reason why this famine came to the people of Israel. Just take a glance. Judges chapter 21, verse 25. "In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." People were living in the promised land of God, but not how the promised people of God should live. They wanted to do their own thing. They wanted to be about their own business. They did not want kings to rule them, especially the King of Kings. So the land that should have milk and honey now has drought, and it was due to their unfaithfulness. God, through Moses, actually had made a covenant promise to the people of Israel in regards that faithfulness to him brought prosperity, and unfaithfulness to him brought famine. We actually see this in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 1 through 4. And if you faithfully obey the voice of the Lord your God, being careful to do all his commandments that I command you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations on the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you. If you obey the voice of the Lord your God, blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of your womb, and the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of the cattle, the increase of your herds, and the young of your flock. But in this same chapter, God presents to what will happen if they became unfaithful in verses 15 and 19. But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes that I command you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. Cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the field. Cursed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Cursed shall be the fruit of your womb, and the fruit of the ground, and the increase of your herds, and the young of your flock. Cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out. So when we read in verse 2 of our main text, it presents to us the family of the story where we'll be focusing on. That because of this famine in the promised land, due to their unfaithfulness, this family, Elimelech and his wife Naomi, and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, go to a country called Moab. They leave Bethlehem. Bethlehem literally means the house of bread. And during this time, that name, they were not living up to their name. There was no bread in the house. There was famine, nothing to eat, starvation. And so they leave to go to a foreign place. Now, if you're following in the doc, you could actually see the map showing the distance between Bethlehem and Moab. It's not that far of a distance, but to put this decision that this family decides to do into context, to leave Bethlehem, to go to a place called Moab. See, the thing that you may not know is the Moabites were pagans. They worshipped pagan gods. And a way they would worship their pagan gods is through child sacrifice. Their lineage is actually a result of incest, where Lot, the nephew of Abraham, had a son named Moab, which he had with his oldest daughter. Yes, you read that right. Genesis chapter 19, verse 30 to 39. You read it. It's crazy. Lot had a son with his daughter, and his son's tribe ended up performing child sacrifices to worship their pagan gods. They did not worship the God of Israel. To again, make this analogy, it's like a Christian living to live in the most worldly of places because the season that they're in is currently in famine. Well, it's not going well for me here in this Christian life, so I'll go over there to live in the world because it looks like it's going better for them. So you use the world's things to cope with your problems. You use the world's things to get rid of your anxiety. You use the world's things to find entertainment. You use the world's things to try to fix the problems in your life. It's as though the promised land of your life is only conditioned by the things that you can get in the promised land and not by the God of the promised land. See, the whole point of God taking Israel there, it's because it was his. It was to draw them to him. But it's as if our Christian life is only conditioned that if it's going well for me, then I'm good here. And so this decision to leave the promised land to Moab was going to show costly for this family. And the narrator goes straight to the point in verse 3. Doesn't let us know the time frame as to when they got to Moab and then until this sudden death of Elimelech was to happen. But all of a sudden, Naomi became a widow and was left with her 2 sons. She lost her husband. And you may think maybe the 2 sons would have learned the lesson. Like, hey, it's not going for us here. Maybe they would have read Deuteronomy chapter 28, that we're cursed even when we leave. Maybe we should go back. But no, if you read in verse 4, they decide to marry a Moabite woman. And here we're introduced to Orpah and Ruth. And for 10 years, they were all in Moab. Naomi, Mahlon, Chilion, Orpah, and Ruth. Until Mahlon and Chilion died too. But look how the narrator puts it in verse 5. It says, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman, referring to Naomi here, was left without her 2 sons and her husband. She had left the promised land because of a famine, but left that for a tragedy. It's not as though the narrator is trying to be insensitive of what Naomi is going through right now, as though skipping the details of her grief or the process that she's going through. I'm pretty sure you just read it like, man, how tragic is that? In a 10-year span, you lose your husband and your 2 sons. But here, it's meant to kind of set the stage of the mood on how we will continue with Naomi's journey. It's filled with grief, with loss, with hopelessness. She's lost in the darkness of her world, not knowing where to go, not knowing the solution. She just lost her family. We need to be reminded of ourselves, even worse, is to have this here, to bring it more clarity, that women during this time didn't have the same societal rights as men do. It's not like now that women can work for themselves and support themselves and get education themselves, and we have equal rights now. But during this time, it was the husband that would work. And then if the husband couldn't work, if you had sons, they would work. But if you were to lose your husband, at least you had your sons to support you. But if you lose your sons, you're on your own. You're poor. You're outcast. Society thinks that you are accursed. So Naomi is in a foreign place, and so far her story has started with famine, which then resulted in death. And now she is in loneliness. Up to this point, all Naomi knows is tragedy. It's one thing to go through tragedy with your family. It's quite another to go through tragedy by yourself. Like, at least you have a cousin to call, a brother to call, somebody to call, your kids to lean on, something, but by yourself. Some people refer to the book of Ruth as like a mini Job. I think we just got this in the first 5 verses. It's like, wow, man, all this suffering, all these things. Maybe not to the extreme that Job has gone through, because Job got it all in one day, bro. Like, fam, I'm like, where's my turn, God? Just take me out. It's like back to back to back to back tragedy. But at least this, God gave Naomi 10 years in between these tragic moments. But that's kind of the point. The focus, though, just like Job, is not the focus on the tragic moments of life, but on God who redeems you through those tragic moments. And so we look at the second scene here, which is a covenant promise that is made out of this tragedy. We actually see this in verses 6 through 18. It's the bulk of our text, and we're going to see that this part is just mainly dialogue, but it's in the midst of this dialogue where we're able to get a glimpse of the covenant of grace in the least likely of places. But let's first look at verses 6 through 9 for a second here, where it says, Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited the people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Go return, each of you, to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. Something to take note in just verse 6, which allows us to actually get a hint of what's going on throughout of the book, is that it presents the reader the first of just two times where we see the Lord intervene in the narrative of the story. He gets involved. He steps into time and does something. We see it here in the first chapter, which is the beginning of the story, and we're going to see it in the fourth chapter, which is the end of the story. So how then is this book meant to present us this theological agenda of God's faithfulness? Well, think about it. These two times where the Lord is mentioned of intervening in the story are like bookends. Think about it as that. It's indicating that the Lord is working behind the scenes. Kind of like the movies, right? So when you go to the movies, in the introduction, you see who is the director of the movie. And then at the end outro of the movie, you see who just directed the movie. And it's like that. In between the movie, you don't know who the director is. You don't see him in the film, but you know there's a director of that movie, working all the parts, moving all the scenes, telling where to go. And likewise, this is how God is being portrayed here, as bookends, as a director. You see the intro and you see the outro, and in between, we're to know God is working behind the scenes. He is moving all the pieces. He is the one that's directing this whole story. And God is directing Naomi's life. This is a good reminder for any of us that may have faint memories or have forgotten of the times where you notice that the Lord has intervened in your life. That although you may not notice God intervene, He is working behind the scenes for your good. He is directing you. He is orchestrating every part of your life to take you where you need to be. You may not like the journey, but you're not the director. He is. You're just a piece of the story. And this story is so much greater. This story of redemption, which was written before creation, before you even came to be. So just know that if you've forgotten that this God is intervening in your life, moving all the pieces, just know He has a plan for each and every one of us, for Him to be glorified. And here we see just this glimmer of some sort of hope from this lonely woman going through tragedy. Naomi hears that the Lord has provided food in the land. She hears it. I just, sometimes when I be reading, I just imagine she was just by the well and there was this chisme, Like, hey, you heard? The Lord came back, bro. Like, what? She's just there like, they came back. There's food again. There's bread in the house. I could just imagine her at least, hey, I could go back. I may be poor, but at least there's bread. I may be going through it, but at least I can eat. And so she decides to go back to Bethlehem. But here, Naomi knows that she's not the only one going through loneliness. Her two daughters-in-law are also going through loneliness. They lost their husbands. Let's not neglect that here. That's a 10-year marriage. That's not easy. And Naomi reminds them that at least there's some sort of hope for them. Tells Orpah and Ruth to go back to their mom's house. At least you got a house to go back to. And blesses them and prays for them. She says, may the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest. Man, to pray for someone who is in mourning and just to say the right things, man, that's hard on its own. But to pray for someone who is in mourning while you're in mourning, while you're going through something, that's quite another story. Takes a lot. Naomi kisses them. There was this love relationship she had between her and her two daughters-in-law. Not to leave them in mourning. Not to leave them by themselves. But she had to leave them. But here, lets the readers know that, again, we need to be reminded, this is God bringing Naomi back to Bethlehem. But look how quick this dialogue between Naomi and her two daughters escalate in verses 10 through 13. It says, and they said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. That word turn back again, return, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. This is where we're able to see the status of Naomi's hopelessness. She had no husband. She had no other sons. She even says she's too old to get remarried. Bro, you could tell this is not 2025. They don't be saying that now. I be seeing people get married at 60. I'm like, Lord Jesus. Like, yep, woo, found my man. You know? Probably went through a conference, get you a Boaz. And they're like, all right. But this time, I don't think Naomi's just that old. But that's what happens. You begin to say these things, right? When you're going through it, man, there's no hope for me. There's nothing. There's no option. I'm just this. I'm just that. I'm just that. I'm just that. I'm just that. You're looking at the condition of your life and not the God of your life. You just look, all negativity, everything is pessimistic. She even says that even if she were to get pregnant, she asked them this question, are y'all going to even wait until they get older? That would be kind of weird, bro. Like, I don't even know how old Ruth was, but like, yeah, I'll wait. I'm going to help raise them too. Like, ooh, bro, like weird. Like, yeah, but that's kind of the point, is to make this sarcastic statement like, you won't do that. There's no hope sticking with me. She tells Orpah and Ruth, girls, I know you love me. I know you want to be with me. I know you went through a journey similar as what I'm going through, but sticking with me leads to more misery. But look at the statement she makes at the end of verse 13, which probably made Orpah change her mind. Naomi says, no, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. She thinks God is against her. This statement that Naomi makes has some truth to it, but it is expressed from a place of bitterness. Yes, this is the Lord's doing. God is all over this. Every molecule, every movement, every piece of the puzzle in life, God has ordained. Everything has meaning. Everything has purpose, and it comes from God. There's no escaping that. So yes, the Lord works all things according to the counsel of his will, Ephesians 1:11. The hand of the Lord is all over Naomi's life. But where Naomi believes it's against her, it's actually the Lord working out his will. See, the thing is that every test comes from God, as it is ordained from God, and it is controlled by God to bring out the glory of God. Every single situation in your life, when it comes to suffering, has meaning and has purpose. It's not for anything. But this bitterness that Naomi has takes a turn with some covenant language, which what follows in verse 14. And look at the word that people just tend to gloss over, which is actually the key piece for the rest of the book. Look at verse 14. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. We will see in verse 15 that kiss from Orpah was a kiss of goodbye. But that word that is used there for Ruth, but Ruth clung to her. That word for clung, davak, to cling, to hold fast, to stick with, to be joined together, is a covenantal phrase. It's a lifelong clinging. See, that same word is used when expressing the lifelong clinging between a husband and a wife. In Genesis 2:24, it says this: therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast, davak, to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Of course, here Ruth is making a covenant promise to Naomi that she will never leave her alone no matter what. No matter the bitterness, no matter the suffering, no matter the mourning, she clung to Naomi. Look how Ruth articulates this covenant promise in verse 15 to 18. And she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. Wherein will you be buried, I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts from me. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. As we see in verse 15, Orpah kissed Naomi goodbye. Oftentimes, we can definitely understand when we are going through tough trials in life, those closest to us will often leave you alone because they have their own trials that they're going through. And they want to deal with them by themselves. So you're going through a trial, I'm going through a trial. You need your space, I need my space. And that's oftentimes understandable. You can't really blame people when they do through that. But what Ruth exemplifies here is what a true covenant promise is amongst people you love. You're not meant to be going through that alone, even if you are also in mourning. Church, as we quickly approach our covenant membership recognition, where we will become members and covenant together as a church, please keep in your hearts that covenant membership promise that we're going to do together. That list of things that we will say to one another. That we cling to one another this way. Not leaving another person alone with their problems because you have your own. Not leaving someone go through death just because you're going through death. Not leaving someone to be put by themselves just because they messed up one time. That's not what church is. That's not why God established the institution of the church, so that we can love one another and help one another and be there for one another and lean on one another. And yes, even mourn with one another. And Ruth shows us up to what ends this covenant goes as far to. Until death, she says. She even says, may the Lord be my witness. And although we've learned so much more about Naomi and her life, there is a reason why this book is called the Book of Ruth. And we see that here. Also note Ruth's conviction here. She says, your people shall be my people and your God is my God. And she even uses the name of God's covenant name, Yahweh, here. May Yahweh do so to me. This is a Moabite woman, a pagan worshiper, now worshiping Yahweh. If you did not know, this is the only book in the Old Testament that is named after someone that wasn't an Israelite. Why would God do that? Why would God specifically, again, it could have been Naomi, Israelite, Boaz, Israelite, but no, it's named after Ruth. And it's named after Ruth for this very reason, to show this covenant promise. Because it's through this Moabite woman that Naomi's return to grace, which we will see in the third and final scene of this first act of the story. We see this in verses 19 to 22, but let's take this part in sections. Let's first look at verse 19. It says, so the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem, and when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred up because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? So Ruth and Naomi go back to Bethlehem, and they're the talk of the town. But not in a good way. Is this Naomi? The women said. Man, when life hits you, it hits you, bro. You look messed up. Like you not well put. You look like you just got out of bed. You don't even care no more. It leaves scars. And I can only imagine Naomi, how she looked like. Probably emotionally exhausted, in mourning, to such a point where she cannot weep anymore. She cannot cry. She is bitter. I mean, have you ever gone through such sadness where tears no longer come out? Have you ever gone to such a point where you cried yourself to sleep and then you woke up crying? Have you ever gone to a point where you lost your ability to sleep because all you have is grief on your mind? There are many things we could take away from this statement. Is this Naomi? Maybe she was unrecognizable. Maybe Naomi was the type of person that she was always smiling, always joyful, always optimistic, always happy. We don't know. But for them to most likely saw sorrow in her face, sadness, as going through something nobody wants to go through. She's probably thinking to herself, why me? Regardless of what it may be, something was evident. They couldn't recognize her. But look at Naomi's response in verse 20. She said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. Naomi's response is evident to how she's feeling. But something to take notice here, Naomi's name literally means pleasant or delight. And who you were and what you were named after is how you would live. It's how you would reflect. So think about it. She was a delight to be around, pleasant to be with. And all of a sudden she says, do not call me this, but call me Mara. Mara literally means bitterness. But what's amazing is that she actually recognizes who's at work here. She recognizes the sovereignty of God, and she says, the Almighty, El Shaddai, the most powerful. But says it's the most powerful God that's dealing with her very bitterly. In this case, it's not that God made her bitter, but that she has gone through something in which she became bitter. But the reason of her bitterness is described in verse 21. Look at this. It says, I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? Just quickly, just take a step back here. Let's try to look at this from Naomi's lens. To her, with the statement that she just said, her definition of fullness was having her whole family full. The wholeness of her family was the fullness of her life. She had left emptiness of a famine, but at least with the fullness of her family. But then comes back to the fullness of the promised land, but with the emptiness of her family. Her definition of fullness was the things that she had. Now let's take another step back. Let's look at the scope of what the Bible teaches us of what fullness truly is. Paul's prayer in Ephesians puts it this way. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14 and 19. For this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory may grant you to the strengthened with power through the Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth, and that to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Naomi's definition of fullness was something temporary. God's definition of fullness is himself, which is eternal. Literally. Again, we oftentimes only feel that we are full when we have everything together. Full fridge, full bank account, full family, full of life, full of adventure, full of good jobs, full of good classes in school, full of happiness, full of everything that you ever wanted. And God is showing in this narrative story by bringing Naomi back to the place where she should have never left in the first place, that fullness is not defined by what we have, but who we have. And that is God, the Almighty. And God here is about to reveal to Naomi what fullness actually is, which is only found in him. And finally, verse 22, Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her. He returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. It's amazing how this first act of the book of Ruth actually ends on a cliffhanger. Kind of like leaving you, what's the second act going to be? The chapter started in famine, but ends in a harvest. In the eyes of Naomi, she's experiencing the famine in her life, but God, through his word, provides to us, the reader, that the trajectory of Naomi's tragedy is on its way to an abundant harvest only found in him for the glory of God. Not to neglect what she's going through. Not putting aside her suffering like it's nothing, but putting Naomi's tragic journey in the forefront, where God will use it for his awesome plan of redemption, not only for her, but for each and every one of us here. That through her tragic moment, through her suffering, through the suffering of Naomi, was brought to us the Savior of the world. And so please take away from this that yes, in life there is leaving and there's returning. Leaving where you experience suffering, but returning where you experience God's redeeming grace. And in the midst of all that you have been going through, that you need to know fullness is only found in God. It's only found in him. So that whenever we do experience those moments of suffering, those moments where we're dealing with tragedy, we don't leave God where God has us in the moment. We don't leave him behind, but we cling to him because he has clung to us through his covenant promise, which he made through his precious son on the cross. See, the suffering is not meant to leave you there. It's meant to mold you there, to conform you to his image, to draw you closer to him, not to draw you away from him, not to leave him, not to visit the Moabs of our life, but to go to him. So know that this is who God is. So that although suffering may come, he intervenes for your good. And he brings you back to him. So that those same people that once told Naomi, is this Naomi? Is this unrecognizable person going through suffering, going through tragedy? You? That those same people at the end of your story, God will use to say and tell you, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer. God is faithful. And although we may experience famine, death, loneliness, God will take us to him who experienced the greatest famine when he was left alone on a cross. The greatest death that none of us can ever go through. And the loneliness that for 3 days he would not out us, but conquered death on our behalf. So we can be brought to harvest in him. God is faithful. Let us pray, church.